And welcome back to the Inside Connection podcast, powered by MediConnect Insurance. I'm your host, Sean Horn, joined by my good friend, Lance O'Brien, just back from a little sabbatical, little vacation. How you feeling?
I feel great. I call it our COVID cruise. We had this scheduled for March of 2020. And the cruise line shut down 2 days before we were supposed to actually set sail. So it was nice. We got to go to Aruba, which is somewhere I always wanted to go. Spent a couple days in the Dominican Republic. So Beautiful. It was great. I'm refreshed and ready to go.
Ready to go to work now, right?
Let's do it.
Heading into the annual enrollment period here shortly. But today we're going to be talking about another crucially important subject matter. One I'm surprised we haven't even touched on yet. My fault there. But the initial enrollment period of Medicare. Look, if you're ever going to have Medicare explained simply, put it on the lower shelf of the cookies like Mama always talked about, right? If you're ever going to have it done for you correctly, it needs to be done the first time. So let's first and foremost talk about the initial enrollment period and what exactly it is. So what timeline are we on? When does it initiate? Walk us through that a little bit, Lance.
Yeah, and I think actually the way that it's explained is really important, right? Because the initial enrollment period is a 7-month window of time, 3 months before, the month of, and 3 months after you enroll in Part B.
Okay.
And I'm not sure that's how most people explain it. Most people explain it's 3 months before, the month of, and 3 months after you turn 65.
Correct.
The problem is not everybody enrolls in Medicare Part B, which is kind of that linchpin, right, of when you're going to get private insurance and walk away from group coverage. Not everybody does that at 65. So to think of the initial enrollment period as simply turning 65, that's going to be a mistake.
On top of that, I mean, the reason why this show today is so important, if I may, is we're talking about the next 2 years. This is a number you've been talking about a lot lately. We've never had an influx of Medicare beneficiaries enrolling for the first time due to the age of 65, people turning 65 years of age. We've never had this kind of jump in history.
Yeah, we know we're in this huge run now, right? All the way up until 2032, 33, right? Just came back not too long ago from a conference, over 2,000 people who Medicare is all they do. 2024, 2025 are going to be the two biggest years in this 10-year run, if you will. So there's so many people coming into the program. There's so many nuanced rules to this initial enrollment period. There's so much misinformation out there from sometimes it's from professionals, unfortunately. A lot of times it's from the non-professionals. They're just getting advice from their mom, their sister, their brother, their coworker, the mechanic. I don't even know who they're getting the information from. But, if I don't sign up for Medicare, I'm going to get penalized. Well, it's not necessarily true. Can it be true? Yes. Is it always true? No. And that's where the problems lie in the initial enrollment period.
And I'll even say as well, not only do we have a lot of people potentially enrolling for the first time due to age, but then you also have the people who may be enrolling at the age of 67 or whatever it might be, who've worked beyond their 65th birthday, had the group coverage, and they're either finally retiring or they're open-minded to looking at what Medicare could look like for them against their group benefits. Because a lot of times we're seeing people, who, historically people have been staying on their group coverage as long as they possibly can. I don't know if it's like, hey, I don't want to take on Medicare because now I'm old.
Right.
Which you shouldn't really be feeling that way.
Yeah, it doesn't matter, right? You're the same age regardless.
You're the same age regardless. But not only that, I mean, we're seeing a lot of times when it comes to the group coverage, you either have really good coverage where Medicare can't touch it, or your coverage really isn't that good and you just don't know any better, but you keep on it just because, So really we want to ensure that people who are beyond the age of 65 really take a look at that. But I want to take it a step further with, here in southwestern Pennsylvania, a lot of people, my parents included, they're so deeply rooted in this community, they don't go anywhere. So it's a really highly populated region for people who are Medicare eligible. So
absolutely.
I mean, I talk about the fact that my mom and dad live on the south side of Pittsburgh, literally minutes away from all those bridges, and they don't cross a bridge because they think they're going on vacation when they do. So, and really there's a lot of people in our community like that. So when you add in the fact that we're surrounded by phenomenal health coverage and health systems, and we have a pretty old community here, and we love that, and they built this whole region up. we really want to make sure they're taken care of.
Absolutely. I mean, so you've got them at this critical juncture. They've had help all their life doing it. Now they're making this transition without those normal channels of help that they've had, right?
Yep.
Where they've had an HR administrator and they're kind of on their own, right? And they're looking for answers. Some people are doing research. I mean, we recently had somebody who started the research of this initial enrollment period, getting onto Medicare, and they were like, I need help. I can't do this on my own. So yes, we want to make sure this vulnerable, because they are, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, this huge population, this confusing information is being able to walk through this journey onto Medicare in the best way. And you're right, Sean. There are more and more people that are doing the comparison, if you will, and are starting to be surprised at, wow, Medicare is a real option for me, even though I'm going to keep working.
I mean, I've said it before and I'll say it again. I'm going through some health things right now, and I had to go through an MRI a couple months ago. Cost me $771, and I have pretty good insurance through my wife's employer.
Yeah, she works for a hospital, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And had I been on Medicare, it would not have cost me more than $200 for that service. So, I mean, right there, that ought to tell you that maybe I should look at it. If a guy that works in Medicare for the last 12 years is saying he could, if he could get on it, he would do it tomorrow. Which, by the way, I am saying. So let's talk about why is Medicare, especially your first time getting onto it, why is it so difficult to navigate?
Because there's not one rule.
Okay.
There's a whole bunch of rules that have offshoot rules, right?
That's true.
So it's like, if you're turning 65, you know, most people are like, well, I have to get Medicare. Well, if you're actively working, right, then you don't need to get Medicare necessarily, right? But if you have less than 20 employees, then you do need to get Medicare. But if you have an HSA, then you shouldn't get Medicare, right? So like, just in that 30 seconds, there's 4 different scenarios of what you should or shouldn't do based on the coverage you have or don't have, if you're working, not working. That's why it's so difficult, is there's not a one size fits all. And you don't
But by the way, I have to cut you in real
No.
quick. Many of those rules you just went over, brand new within the last 2 years.
A lot of them brand new or just completely just unknown. They're the fine print,
Yep.
if you will, when people start researching this.
But also, you mentioned just a moment ago, and you're absolutely right about this. There's no more HR directors or benefits coordinator to walk you through Medicare like you had during your working years. So,
Yeah.
why is that such a handicap?
Well, again, because what they're doing is they're doing all the legwork, right? They're checking prices, they're going over copay structures, they're checking formularies. Like, they're literally doing all the homework. And frankly, they're not doing it. And I could be wrong on this one, I'll say, because I'm not in that space of group coverage,
Okay.
but I don't think they're doing it on 70 plans. Right, where somebody in the Medicare space, if they're looking at an Advantage plan, especially in Allegheny or any of the surrounding counties here in Western PA, they would have to weed through that many plans, right? So that's really the challenge of not having someone to walk through all the different aspects of the options that are available.
But it's not only how many options are available, it's how they're communicated to you as well.
Yeah.
I mean, we have seen the stacks of paperwork on the kitchen table when we're
TV commercials.
the TV commercials, the phone calls, everything that really comes in abundance once you're Medicare eligible. You say it all the time, you've never been more popular than when you're nearing your 65th birthday, because it's an onslaught of information.
Yeah, and I think the challenge is I don't think that the average person, let's take the difficulty of Medicare itself out of the equation. I don't think they even know what to look for when it comes to their group plan. And what I mean by that is this: they generally are not even sure what they're paying for it, right? Because a lot of times when we're sitting down with someone, how much are you paying for your group coverage? I don't know, I got to find a pay stub, right?
Yep.
So they're not even knowing what they're paying for the coverage month over month. Beyond that, they're usually not high-end utilization at that point in time because they've been in their 50s, 60s, right? So they're thinking, I don't pay much and the coverage is really good. Where when we start to dig down into the plans more, because there's 4 things we look at when we're helping someone compare their group coverage to Medicare. When we really start to drill into that, that's when it becomes an eye-opening experience to the individual consumer.
Undoubtedly. And now, we're going to be having a break here in a couple minutes, but I do want to, also bring out the major, I mean, the main component to the initial enrollment period that I think really needs to be laid out, and we're going to dive into this hardcore in the next segment, is the guaranteed approval provision that you have available inside of this 7 months window surrounding your Medicare enrollment date. So, that is a big one we really got to focus in on next segment. And we've helped a lot of people just through that little provision save thousands of dollars when it comes to needing their health care.
Yeah, so the ACA comes out, Affordable Care Act, right? What's one of the big parts of it?
No underwriting.
No pre-existing conditions that would require underwriting. And people think that carries over and equates to Medicare as well. And in some cases it does, but it's not a hard and fast rule that overlays every aspect of private insurance when it comes to Medicare. There are definitely plans that could be excluded from the individual based on their health in their initial enrollment period.
And that's a big factor. We're going to dig into that a little bit deeper in the next segment. But also, if you do have Medicare on the radar in the next 12 months, we do have neighborhood events. We're coming right to your street to make sure you know how Medicare works so that you can start your career off correctly. And some of the neighborhoods we're going to be at are West Mifflin, Oakdale, Gibsonia, Washington, Penn Hills, Butler, Coraopolis, Bethel Park, and Glenshaw. So really, we're hitting all the quadrants of the city.
Yeah, we're all over. I mean, and there's a reason for it, right? Like these are high demand. It's not like we have 2 or 3 people showing up. I mean, generally we're 15, 20, sometimes more coming to every one of these events, because what we're doing is we're taking all this complicated information, we're putting it into a good, solid 45-minute presentation, opportunity to ask questions, and then we're following it up with that one-on-one appointment that helps people really create their timeline, understand budget, all of those things.
So let us help you have Medicare made simple. Go to MediConnectInsurance.com, see the readout of our seminars by clicking on the seminars tab, or call 888-818-6334.
Medicare is confusing and a little scary.
Plan B, Part B,
HMO, PPO. I feel lost.
Whether you're just starting Medicare or currently on Medicare, you're faced with critical decisions each year. Questions like, do I need a Medicare plan? Is my current coverage still my best option? Will I still be able to see my doctors? I'm Brian Breisinger with MediConnect, the area's premier independent healthcare advisory firm. We can help avoid costly pitfalls today and in the future. We can meet with you in person or over the phone. Choose an expert in your community.
MediConnect walked us through everything.
Best of all, it didn't cost us anything.
That's right. Our licensed experts can offer unbiased advice on all of your healthcare options at no cost to you.
MediConnect is a great organization.
MediConnect, bridging the healthcare gap. For no-cost advice, call 888-818-MEDI or go to MediConnectInsurance.com.
And welcome back to the Inside Connection podcast powered by MediConnect Insurance. I'm Sean Horn. He is my good friend Lance O'Brien. And, we talked in great detail about the initial enrollment period of Medicare in the opening segment. We're going to continue that conversation on forward because, again, there's a lot of perplexing and confusing, roads to travel relating to your initial onboarding of Medicare. And we really want to make sure that the audience gets it right the first time. So let's do a little review, rewind it real quick, and talk about the time period in which we consider the initial enrollment period of Medicare.
Yeah, so the initial enrollment period of Medicare is a 7-month window of time, 3 months before, the month of, and 3 months after when an individual first gets their Part B. That could be before 65, if disability is in play, right? Mm-hmm. Which we're not going to go into all the rules there either. It could be at 65 if they're no longer working and have active coverage, right?
Which is most common.
Which is common for sure. Or it could be post 65 because they kept working, kept their group coverage because it was better when compared to Medicare. So it's that 7-month window. When it begins depends on a few factors.
So you mentioned the group benefit side of it, continuing to work.
Yes.
So I want to ask you a myth and see if this is true or
Sure.
what the reality is. So I'm beyond the age of 65 years old. I'm not yet collecting Social Security. I'm good to go. Is Medicare available to me then?
Absolutely.
So I don't need to be collecting Social Security to get on Medicare, nor do I need to be on Medicare to get Social Security. So they're kind of independent of one another.
They are. I mean, you sign up for Medicare through Social Security. That's pretty much the only real linchpin, if you will, other than that's how you pay for your coverage later when you sign up for your Social Security. But no, you can get Medicare without collecting your Social Security. You're just going to get billed quarterly for your Part B cost, right? And vice versa. You can have Social Security without your Medicare. Now, a lot of people don't do that because there's income limitations that you can make if you're taking Social Security at the same time. So, but yeah, they are mutually exclusive, if you will, for the most part.
And then now, I mean, as it relates to how many people we're helping through this initial, because I mean, look, the summertime really is when we're really
It's retirement time, right,
It
baby?
really
It's
is.
nice weather. Let's get started, right?
It's like people go on vacation and they don't come back. So I thank you for coming back anyways.
Yeah. I wish I didn't have to, but I'm not there yet.
I'm like, thank you for being here. So, you know, the summertime, you know, again, we're very active helping people navigate these treacherous waters. Like, hopefully you did not have to go through on vacation. But, you know, I think it's worth noting that also beyond the age of 65, once you're eligible for Medicare, you can enroll whenever you want. Meaning you don't have to wait for an enrollment period to exist. If you pick July as my date that I want Medicare to start, you can very easily disenroll from your group benefits, get onto Medicare, have a seamless transition with no penalties or anything. Am I?
Yeah, and actually there's a couple points there. That's one of the big things. People are like, we hear this a lot. I've got to enroll. I've got to make a decision. I've got to make a decision because this is the only time of year. Listen, you may have an enrollment period for your plan, but there's no disenrollment period from your plan, right? So you may have to make a decision in July and you're not yet Medicare eligible for November, let's say. Well, you can enroll for that next year and then disenroll. Post 65, right? Say you do the comparison. We help you do that at 65 and things are better for you on your group coverage because it does happen sometimes. And we're happy to tell you that. We just want you to get an apples to apples comparison, right? And that's where people make a mistake. But what happens is, say you do that for the first year, then they come back, as sometimes happens with group coverage, and the premium went up $150 a month. Are you stuck in that group plan? Absolutely not. You can disenroll from a group plan at any time if you're Medicare eligible and start your Medicare.
Great point there. And then we have to talk a lot more because we kind of blew by it. We mentioned it briefly in the first segment, but I think this is critically important for anybody who could potentially be nearing Medicare and watching today, and it is the guaranteed issue provision.
Yes.
So this 7-month window, which again, the middle part of it is your Part B date. So 3 months, there's your month, and then 3 months after. During that window there, it's a very short period of time. I call it the golden ticket of getting onto Medicare. You have no health questions asked of you no matter which way you want to go. Explain that a little bit further.
Yeah, so I think the first thing in explaining that's going to be is there's 2 different types of private insurance.
Correct.
And we have mentioned that on this podcast, and we've probably touched on this, but not in the depth we're going to do right now, right? So if someone chooses a Medicare Advantage plan for their private insurance when they go on to Medicare, there's never any underwriting questions. There used to be one a few years ago, which they got rid of, thankfully, around end-stage renal disease or kidney failure, right? But as it stands today, you could go on a Medicare Advantage plan at 65, 68, 70, and your medical history is not going to matter at all. Now, a Medicare supplement, which just happens to be the more comprehensive medical coverage, meaning you get more coverage for your A and B service, inpatient and outpatient medical services, right? There are underwriting guidelines related to that. So when you first get into your initial enrollment period, that 7-month period of time, you can get a Medigap plan with no medical underwriting whatsoever. So if I've got cancer at the time, if I've had open heart surgery a year earlier, right? Or you see a lot of specialists, you have chronic conditions, you're going to want to look hard at a supplement. And this is where I go crazy, and then I'll stop talking for a minute. But this is where I really go crazy, is because somebody will talk to their neighbor and say, this is what you should absolutely do. I actually had a guy come to a webinar we did during COVID and said, I was told if I get anything other than a Medicare Advantage plan, I'm absolutely crazy, because it's the best value. And it's his friend telling him this. Well, he had cancer. He had chemo. His medical issues in that initial enrollment period mattered. Once he got the full education, he went with the supplement because he was able to understand, if I don't do this now, I won't be able to do it later.
A very good point there. I mean, and we each have situations and stories that really can talk a lot to that particular subject, and I'll get into one in a moment. But, that provision I keep talking about of the guaranteed issue, those health questions they ask you, they're pretty detailed in what they're looking for.
They are.
And really what they're trying to do, because it's the Medigap companies, the Medicare supplement companies, that ask these questions, what they're trying to do is really limit claim payout for an extended period of time. They really want to take in premium dollars as long as they can before paying out claims, especially at a massive level on you.
Yes.
So that's the reason for the whole, the necessity, of really having to ask these health questions of you, is they don't want to pay claim dollars out immediately. And looking at that situation where this gentleman probably had chemo and radiation, other things going on, all of those services were probably covered minimally, if any, out-of-pocket costs at all, right?
That's right.
And in my situation with the client that I worked with, I tell the story in all our seminars that I have to do where, I have a client that was referred to me through my wife, through the hospital she works at. Gentleman was getting a heart transplant, got his Medicare due to a disability or before the age of 65.
Right.
And he comes in and says, I don't know what to do. And I said, okay, well, I know your scenario because of how you referred over, so let's get into this. Showed him both sides. Thankfully, he went with the Medicare supplement. 2 weeks after signing up for it, the heart comes in, which the timing of all this
Good
is crazy.
for him.
Yeah.
Yes.
Heart comes in, 7-day hospital stay. He had his heart taken out, another one put back in. And he was discharged within 7 days, which that still blows my mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the total billable amount of that entire procedure was a little north of $2 million.
Crazy.
So if he only had Medicare A and B, he would have been responsible for $400,000 out of pocket.
Right.
But because of the way that the Medigap worked, he had nothing out of pocket.
Right.
He wrote a check for $150 and he saved himself $400,000. So that right there ought to give a clear example as to why you really need to pay attention during your initial enrollment period on which makes the most sense for you. Your neighbor might be very happy with their plan. It might work beautifully, but your individual situation related to Medicare, it's like your fingerprint, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's so individualized depending upon your doctors, your medicines, how you use your healthcare. Do you travel? We have to take all of these things into consideration.
And that's where I'll go back to the very way that you started this show today, which was there's no more important time to get it right. And that's why we encourage people a year ahead of time, start the conversation, right? Listen, we see people come to the seminars all the time. We simplify the information, but yet their brain's exploding when they leave, right?
Oh, yeah.
Then they have time to process. Then we meet with them one-on-one. They process more. And it's actually really getting to the place, because this is what matters to me, to you, to us, that they really understand how this works, that they're not making a decision in haste or unfortunately, sometimes they're pressured into a decision. We want the educational foundation, which gives them confidence, peace of mind. That takes time to absorb it so that when they are ready, when they're making it, they can be like, yes, the Medigap is best for me, or the Medicare Advantage seems right for me. Now, going back to the exclusion and the underwriting, you can get the Medigap plans later. So say you don't take it originally, you can get it later. It's not based on age. We've both had people in their late 70s, early 80s have past underwriting for the supplements. It's truly about your health situations. They're going to ask you somewhere between 25 and 35 questions. And if you can pass the underwriting, you can get it, but it's no longer guaranteed.
No longer guaranteed. You can get declined, or you can get rated, meaning you'll pay a higher premium
Right.
versus getting on your first time. And again, that no health question where you get the preferred coverage, the preferred premium payments.
Right.
You're at the lowest level you'll ever have. So it really makes sense to take advantage of that open opportunity you have the first time you get on to Medicare. And I do also want to say, for those of you who were beyond the age of 65 and continuing to work, again, it really makes sense to even take a look at Medicare, even if you think you're happy with your group coverage, because of what happened back in 2018 with the two local big insurance companies and their fight. It really sprung competition like we have never seen in the Medicare industry before. So as a result, you could be looking at really strong benefits, maybe further benefits than what you have right now at a lower price point even. So we do that line by line comparison like you were talking, and make sure that whichever way you think is best for you, again, you're very clear on that decision.
Absolutely. And just very quickly, we've seen this often. People stay on their group coverage, but they get Part B.
Yeah.
Because they think they have to have Medicare. First of all, they're paying extra money every month, and they just forfeited their ability to get coverage without passing the underwriting.
Correct.
That's a problem.
Big problem. So let MediConnect make Medicare simple for you. Once again, we're going to be live in your neighborhood. So if you're going to be new to Medicare within the next 12 months, the readout goes as follows: West Mifflin, Oakdale, Gibsonia, Washington, Penn Hills, Butler, Coriopolis, Bethel Park, and Glenshaw. Free to attend, 45 minutes of your time. Get that education you deserve. 888-818-6334 or mediconnectinsurance.com.